But okay, going into VRVP, and let me remove the what's it called? I'm gonna remove the RSA here because I don't want to see that crap on my screen. Uh, the one, the big one of my favorite indicators I ever use is the VRVP. Similar to volume down here, volume bars that you see on almost any default chart. What that shows you is volume by time, right? So, for example, we're looking at the let's just go to the 30-minute chart, right? So this volume candle here on Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, this volume candle just represents the volume that's traded within this 30-minute candle here, right? You guys obviously know that. Well, the VRVP is basically the same thing, but it's according to price, right? So let's say at this price over here at 580, 530, what this spike shows here is just the amount of shares that were traded at that area. Now, again, with the volume, you cannot always directly say, hey, it's buying volume or hey, it's selling volume, right? That's why, like, for example, I'll show you right now, like if I actually move, I'll show you how to get the VRVP. So if you go to indicators and you type in VRVP, it stands for visible range volume profile. Now, one thing you always want to keep in mind is I'll actually show how the default looks like. Okay, so this is how the default looks like. It's ugly as hell. But there's two types of volume profiles, right? There's one that's called a session profile. There's one that's called the VRVP, which is visible range volume profile. So the VRVP, which is what I use, and I'll say why I use that more than the session profile, is because the VRVP shows the volume traded by price for whatever is showing on your screen. So right now, this is what the VRVP looks like. And you could see if I scroll out and I show more price, you'll see the VRVP adjust according to that, right? The way session profile works, I don't know if I'll just bring it up really quickly if I can bring it up. So session profile, it goes, actually, I think that's the wrong thing, but
No, I was a session profile trade. It's SVP. It's session volume profile, the one that I think that a lot of people are that they like to use now. You have to type it out. No, it's
this one.
actually that one. Yep. You click on it,
Oh
and
yeah,
then it's gonna show you.
yeah. The reason why I don't use session volume profile, is just because it doesn't, it kind of makes it a little trickier to see the bigger picture, right? To see where exactly the more shares are being traded and when the volume spikes up. So yeah, this could be great to use intraday, but again, even if you're day trading, you always want to look at the bigger picture because the bigger picture always forecasts what you're gonna. It has a higher weight than what you see intraday. So that's why I use the VRVP. Okay, so now that you know what the VRVP, sorry, what were you gonna say? You gonna say something?
Who, me?
Oh, sorry, I thought you said something. But anyway, so now that you know what the VRVP is, I'm gonna go into the settings before I talk about how I use it. So as you can see, they do two different colors. I personally just switch it over to one set of colors. I don't want it to be I don't want it to be too distinct because I don't want to be thinking, hey, it's showing this, so it's got to be bearish or it's got to be bullish. You gotta always remain neutral in trading. I'm a very big believer in that. I don't think it should be too heavy, be like, oh, I'm bearish, I'm bullish. So that's why it ties into why it's very important to keep it one color or similar colors so you don't think, hey, this is bullish volume, because there's no such thing as bullish volume and bearish volume just going off the candlesticks. So the next thing that I also disable is this thing called POC. It's famously used. It stands for point of control. Basically, what that represents is where the area where the most amount of shares were traded. The reason why I remove this or I uncheck this ties in a little bit later on how I use the VRVP, so I'm not going to dive into that. The next thing I do is I personally, you could see the VRP is way too big, so I changed the width of the box to down to 15, just so it could be scaled down. You could still see everything important that you need to see. And then for the inputs, the next important thing, the row size, I set it to usually 200 or 100, doesn't really matter. And then volume area, I like, do I usually put this higher? Let me see. No, yeah, I usually put it higher, just so it has the entire. Okay, my mind's blanking on how I usually do it. 1 second, let me see how I do it. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Yeah, so I usually set this to 100. Sorry. So this just highlights the entire area. So this is how my VRVP looks, right? You can always, adjust this. If you don't want 200, you could do it 100, and it kind of makes the boxes bigger. If you wanted a lot more boxes, or where it seems more fluid, you could change it up. But it doesn't really drastically change the sentiment that you're looking at, right? It doesn't change what the use of this indicator is. So the reason why I use the VRVP is, again, similar to this volume down here. Both of these volume indicators are live data, right? Indicators, almost all indicators, actually all indicators are lagging indicators, meaning it goes based on data for the previous candle close, right? So it's less reactive, and live data is going according to the current things that's happening right now in that very second. So that's why I like using VRVP. Many people will tell you, and this is why it's so annoying, and that's why like we do these live sessions, because there's so many things that are missaid and misused, right? And they always say that when it comes to VRVP, the important thing you need to pay attention to is the thing I was talking about beforehand, which is the point of control, right? The most area where the thing was, where the stock was traded. And yeah, that's not necessarily wrong. Like, yeah, you can pay attention to it. It is an area where you want to pay attention to, but no one talks about the important parts, right? The more reactive areas is not in the middle. If you see here, wherever there's more volume traded, that just means there's range, right? So where does it exactly mean I should be paying attention to? Well, it's very simple. If it's not in the middle, it's right at the beginning of these peaks, right? You could call these peaks, you can call these volume shelves, you can call them nodes. All three terms are correct. But the start of the peaks is where the strongest reactions will always be. Whether it's bounces or rejections, that's what I always look at, right? This always helps you paint out a great picture of where levels would be. A lot of people ask, hey, how do you do your levels? Well, yeah, you could do it according to price. But the most important thing you want to look at is if most stocks are always stuck in a range, right? So you want to figure out where the bottom of the range is and the top of the range is. And you could see that here, we're on the 2-hour chart, and you could see that just by looking easily at the top and the bottom of the volume shelf, okay? So if I, for example, were to draw this point of control, all I'm getting is a hesitation area. You could see in this entire area where this level is, it's just hesitation. There's not so many strong movements. Yes, there's one or two, but if you were to take, you can't like necessarily take a trade based off of this because you don't know exactly where it will go, right? If price crept down to this point, you're like, okay, will it actually bounce off of this? You don't really know, right? But if you were to take a trade off of the area down here where the bottom of the volume shelf is, you have a higher probability trade because the momentum to the upsides every time it comes down this area is pretty strong. Vice versa, top up here, very strong as well. So that's how you look at it. You could even go to a smaller time frame. And that's what I love about the VRVP. You can go into a smaller time frame and look at things in a day trading mindset. And if I clear the things over here, you could see, okay, what's the levels I need to be paying attention to? Well, the drastic levels are up here at 593.61 on Meta, and all the way down here at 573.86. But okay, what if I want to get a little bit smaller than that? All right, so then the ones I would want to be looking at is the mini peaks, right? The mini peaks, you'd see the start of this mini peak right here is right over here at 587. And the start of it is down over here at just around this area, right? So you could see here how you can use it for day trading as well. You see the rejections, you see the bounces, you see that this is a range, right? So if it exits the range, the way it's going is usually the sentiment that it'll continue. So that's what I love about the VRVP. That's how you can easily find levels and ranges, and it really gives you powerful levels that you should be looking at when you might not be looking, when you're looking at all the the middle of the levels that you really don't want to be paying attention to. Intermediate. Thank you, JP. Sorry, English is not my first language. So what's the other use of volume profile? Another big use of volume profile is, we talked about the shelves, right? So the beginning of the volume shelf and the end of the volume shelf, right? So we have two volume shelves, this one over here and this one over here. So the other point, other than the shelves, is this area right here, and this is called a volume gap. So if you put 2 and 2 together, if these volume peaks show where most of the shares are traded, this indicates that there's a lot of levels within this area. So that means if you have bullish movement into a peak or a volume shelf, that means you're going to have hesitation there, right? Because there's a lot of levels, because you can't always tell whether it's buying or selling volume, right? Vice versa, if you have price action into a volume shelf, you're going to find hesitation because you don't know if it's buying or selling volume. But if you find, if this represents where a lot of levels are, that obviously means once price creeps into the volume shelf, price is going to be a lot more volatile, right? It's going to knife through the area where there's going to be no volume. And that's what I love about volume VRVP. It shows where areas of where the very strong movements will be. Back here in September, I remember I took meta calls. The reason why I took meta calls, one, price was indicating that there's going to be a continuation. And one of the biggest things is, as you can see here, there was a volume gap. Back then, actually, you see these little volume spikes over here? That was never there because, that was only created by this bullish candle. But over here was completely empty, and you could see the gap up we had there from Wednesday to Thursday was pretty big. And I remember this trade itself was around 400% for meta calls. So that's why it's very important to look at volume gaps, right? One thing to keep in mind, just because there's a volume gap does not mean price will go there, right? You can't be like, hey, there's a volume gap, it's in the volume gap, it's it's testing the volume gap, it's going to definitely knife through this, right? Because we also talked about how, the bottom of the range, right? Or let's say, like, for instance, right over here, meta is at the bottom of this shelf, right? And price is creeping into this volume gap. So yes, if you have let's say Monday opens and you have a rejection off of this level, let's say we go into the 5-minute, and I'll show you exactly what I would love looking at. If meta opens, let's say, even at break even, let's say it opens here, let's say it opens at 554, comes down, comes up to this level, hesitates over here or just rejects and goes down. That for me is a really good indication for puts, right? I'm not just buying puts here just because it's in the volume gap. I'm waiting for confirmation to show, hey, there's a volume gap over here, but since I'm waiting for confirmation, there's a higher probability that it's actually going to continue to that side. And that's why you see a lot of my trades, they're very big, right? And that's because I wait to see where are the volume gaps and where my trades are. If I'm taking it, if I get confirmation for there to be a push into that volume gap, I'm going to have a very big trade. You could tie this into the recent snow calls that I got into. Where is it? So I got into snow calls here, right? I got into snow calls on Monday. So where's Monday? Yeah, so I got in right before close. I'll show you the, where was it? Yeah, Monday here. I got it right before close. And you could see here on the 2-hour chart, even if I zoom out and I collect more data, right? If I wait for the volume profile to populate, you could see here that the volume gap, there's two of them, right? There's one between this range. Let me clear this so it's a little bit easier. There's one between this range right here, and there's also another mini one between this range. The funny thing is, the reason why it seems a little bit like let me because it seems populated just because of the push up that we had. So let me go to Monday right here. Right. So you could see here better, since this is a lot more cleaner. You could see the volume gap that was here, and you could see the volume gap that's here, right? If you consider this at top of the peak and another bottom of a peak, you could see the two volume gaps that we have here, right? This entire area. So that's why I got the snow calls. And lo and behold, if we go to the current price, you could see, you could see that price just completely broke through that volume gap. And in fact, it touched literally where the bottom of that peak was. So yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing about VRVP. I know that was a little bit talked a lot about, but the reason why I'm talking about it is because it's a very, very useful indicator in my opinion. And it's one I heavily use. And I think it's very underutilized and very misused. So anything you want to add to that?
Can you explain how you utilize VRVP in correlation with price action?
Yeah, okay. So it's very simple. It ties into how it shows levels, right? So since most of you guys day trade, let's just go on to a day trading, what's it called? Scenario. If I'm looking at VRVP, And let's say I'm looking at this and I'm like, hey, here's the bottom of a volume shelf. Okay, what am I looking for? Well, if I see price come down to the area where I see the end of a peak, and I'm starting to see wicks to the downside, that's going to indicate to me that I should get into calls, right? You could see here, right? You could have taken calls here, and the great thing about meta is, this small movement here would have been 30%. This movement here would have been 80%. So that's it's harder to use in day trading. It's not harder, but it's best used when it comes to swing trading. So to answer your question, you have to see where the VRVP is in terms of the peaks and the end and the start of it, and see how price reacts of it in terms of if there's a wick created after it bounces off that level, if it's breaking through it, closing below that level, and then testing a volume gap. So there's things you would want to look for. But yeah.
Does anybody have any questions about VRVP so far? And please don't be shy to ask, because volume shells and peaks and volume gaps are very difficult to comprehend. If you don't understand it, please speak up, because a lot of people think that just because there's a hole between one peak and the other, the price is going to go immediately down to the bottom of that peak, and that's not always the case. Does anybody have any questions? Is anybody here still alive?
They are, I think.
Did everybody just pass out?
I do have a very monotone voice.
Someone is typing. Please, guys, ask questions if you have questions. These are free sessions that we're doing for you, so that you guys can learn.
So I got a question asking, what do the two colors indicate? It's a very dumb term. It's like up volume and down volume. Basically, other layman terms for bearish or bullish volume. But again, it's not very important. The only reason why it's not the same color right now is just because I think it looks, as gay as this sounds, I think it just looks cooler like this versus just one color. I can make it one color and it's not going to impact my trading at all. It could be like this. It just looks a little bit uglier this way, so that's why I make it a little bit different. Hopefully that answers your question. The next question was, VRVP and MACD are correlated? No.
Or are they asking that?
In the ask us.
MACD is a moving average conversion divergence indicator. That has nothing to do with VRVP.
Yeah, MACD is
That used to be
MACD.
my old school weapon of choice, by the way.
Yeah. We're not gonna get too deep into the MACD because I think I personally think RSI is a better indicator to use versus MACD.
MACD is phenomenal
Yeah.
for swing trades. It's not ideal for
Yeah.
day trades unless you have specific settings that function for day trades.
Okay. Yeah. Um. Yeah. JP summed it up perfectly. But you know what? I'll go through examples. The thing that sucks is, the volume profile shows it populates according to what's shown on the screen. So it's a lot more easier to show like SMAs because it already happened and doesn't keep on changing. But what I can tell you is a possible trade plan, right? So let me go to Meta. Okay, let me tell you what my thoughts are on Meta.
I
Yeah,
was gonna say if you could use something other than Meta, because Meta
sure.
has such a clean volume gap there.
Yeah.
Come
Okay.
up with
What do you want
anything
me to
else.
use?
CrowdStrike, CRWD.
CrowdStrike. Okay. All right. Cool. Oh. Thank you, JP.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So I love this. So this is a perfect example of how I'd use the VRVP. Okay. So first of all, I took CrowdStrike calls. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I took CrowdStrike calls once it came down to this bottom of this volume gap. Sorry, volume shelf, and I took. Sorry, I'm burping a lot. I took calls because this is an area where it would most likely bounce. Because again, as I said, the most volatile movements or the volatile bounces are off the bottom of the volume shelf, right? So I took calls off of this. I was aiming for the top of this shelf obviously we didn't this volume gap, but we didn't reach there, right? Which is great. What this means is, looking at this VRVP, right? We are bouncing off the end of this volume peak, which is great. You know, we didn't close below it, we closed above this. This indicates that there's a lot more bullish sentiment than bearish sentiment, okay? So what am I looking at now? Well, we know here, and I'm going to draw it since I'm going to switch over to another time frame. We know here the volume gap is, let's make it smaller. We know the volume gap here is between this range, 355 and 368, right? So we go to 2 hour, and I'm like, okay, all right. This 332 level, if you guys remember, this is where the bottom of the top of the shelf was. So this is an area where we would have taken calls. So what we're doing here is we're tying in the fact that there's a level here on the daily based on the VRVP, right? Because it's the end of the shelf. And then when we go over to 2 hour, we could see here there's no intermediate volume traded, strong volume traded in this area, which means that the push up is more.
Consolidation.
Yeah, exactly. So there's not much consolidation. So the push up over here is going to be more probable than a downside push, right? You can obviously say, yes, of course, you know, there's the volume gap right over in the bottom over here, but that's where price action comes in, right? The price action over here is bullish, and the reason why is it ties into things that I've been talking about for weeks now, right? You look at, oh my God, you look at the wicks. You know, what are the wicks representing to you? You know, they had this bullish 2 hour candle over here. This is iffy, but then the closing 2 hour candle has a nice wick to the downside, and it's showing a possible ascending scallop, right? If I go to 30-minute, you'll see it right here. So we're tying in the fact that if we go onto the daily, there's a volume gap between the 355 to 368, and we would get calls in. We would theoretically get calls in on Friday, and you'd want to trim, of course, throughout the way, but your ultimate target would be testing the volume gap. Because if you get a push here in the volume gap, your calls are going all the way up to like, based on the crowd options movement, this would be like 300% if it reached the volume gap itself. So that's one way to use the volume gap. Give me another ticker, JP.
That's
I'll give
gonna
one more
have
example.
a clean trade like that.
It doesn't need to be clean.
PayPal.
Okay. PayPal. I like that you picked PayPal. Okay. So, you know, let's go to the weekly, because you also always want to look at the weekly to get a bigger idea. So we can obviously see the weekly range. You could, again, you don't need to always look at the candles. You could, that's why VRP is great. You could just look at the VRVP. Okay, where's the important levels? 81.61. That's the only thing we're going to pay attention to. And then you could also say 70.98, but that's not going to be approaching in the near term, right? It's going to be the 81.61. So we go to the daily time frame. We zoom out so we can, you know, get a little bit more data on our VRVP, just so we could get a little bit more, right? And you could see here, lo and behold, why is PayPal a great long-term option? Because even if PayPal were to creep down to 81.61, and even if it were to break below that, look at this big volume shelf that you have here. You have two volume shelves that can join into one. It doesn't matter there's a small tiny little volume gap over here, because what does a volume gap also include? It includes the bottom of a volume shelf. So this level right here itself is also a strong level to hold a support. So that's why PayPal is a really great long-term trade, in my opinion, because look at this immense amount of volume gap that you see here. This is weak volume, right? I could zoom out, I could zoom back out. You could see
Oh my
here,
God.
this is why I have PayPal shares, because you have so much consolidation, you have so much support, and you have so many shares traded here that, of course, if PayPal does come down, you're going to see a possible push up, and that's why I'm in. That's why I like PayPal long term. But give me just a second. I need to attend a very quick call. But JP, yeah, if you want to add any thoughts to the VRVP thing.
No, I'll just wait for you. Does anyone have any questions about anything? Let's see. Ask us. Somebody has a question. Another dumb question. So VRVP is long in certain areas. That means more price action, like more buy and sell. Nigel, I don't understand your question. Are you referring to? Well, I don't understand what you mean. Another dumb question. So the VRVP is long in certain area. That means more. Yes. 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 That's correct. The answer is yes. 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 That's correct. Yes. Sky Blue. Will you also use VRVP to help you choose options for price? What? I can't fucking read. Will you also use VRVP to help you choose option price pick? Oh, because
Sorry.
Sky Blue, you're saying, okay, I get what you're saying. You're thinking that because there's a long thing on the screen, that is going to be an
Uh,
area to buy. Oh, okay, yeah. So like the long thing on the screen will probably is an area where there is the most price action, right? So if you're long and there's like a long thing, you can expect that. Let's just say this is a perfect example, right? If you're looking at Kevin's PayPal screen, right? If you were to take PayPal and that volume gap before at around that $70 price range, Sky Blue, are you with me, Sky Blue? Are you with me? Am I losing you? Let me
no,
know
no,
if
no.
no, no,
Keep going.
I just want to make sure that Sky Blue is here, and I'm not talking to myself. Sky Blue here?
It's okay, JP. Explain it,
Yeah,
cause
yeah.
I'm.
So what I was saying was
Yeah.
that you see, if you would have taken those longs at that 70 price range, that means that there is a lot of interest in price right there, and that something was going to happen.
Yep.
So if you're trading there, that means that the price options are going to be volatile, and then you would look for the next area, right? Where there would be another long area on the VRVP for price action to continue getting volatile. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be in an options contract and then volume dies out, and because then it's just going to move really, really, really slow, and then theta is going to kill you. So that's why kind of using those peaks for targets could work out for you, but it's only if there's constant peaks that are accelerating the move to the upside. Does that make any sense, Sky Blue? You don't want to have like a long volume candle on VRVP and then it just empties out and it's
Yeah.
like dead and then it picks up again. No, you want to have consistent like
Like this.
VRV. Yeah, exactly. You
Yeah.
want
You
that
want
so
to
that the price
shove.
will keep
Yeah.
going and going and going. Okay, you know what? Think of it like this. I'll make it simple. The more, the longer the volume profile is on the screen, the more gas, the more help me out here. The more acceleration there's going to be to price action. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I'm just trying. I
That
want to see
makes
if Sky
perfect
Blue gets
sense.
that.
No, no, no. I was sorry. I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Um,
So the more volume there is on the screen, the faster price is going to move. Does that make sense, Sky Blue?
JP's such a nice guy.
No,
Look at him.
I just don't know if they're listening.
JP, they're listening,
Right.
bro. You always think people aren't listening to you. You're the
No, no, no,
smartest
I
guy
just don't
here.
know because I don't know. Maybe sometimes there's lagging.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
How do
eh,
you identify the top and the bottom of volume shelves? Can you help?
very simple. How do you figure out when the bottom of or the top of a hill is, right? It starts sloping. This is all you do here,
It's
right? You find the slope. You find okay. Here's very simple. You find the slope and you see where prices had volatile reactions, right? So the 70, 98, look right across, right? This is areas where it's rejected, it's bounced, it's come here and it's gone, so same thing here, right? Rejected. Uh, yeah. So okay, did you answer all these questions, Shippy, or no?
yeah, I did. Yeah,
Okay, all
I
right.
did. But then there was one. How much should you zoom in and out to determine how much VRVP you see? So it comes back to visible range volume profile. Literally means exactly what it stands for. The visible range. So you want to use VRVP to trade inside of that range where price action is at. So for example, it- um, Kevin, can
Mm.
you go to from December on PayPal? Can you zoom in so that we can see yeah, from that area of consolidation? Yep. Yeah, can you zoom out a little bit more? Zoom in so we see a tighter volume range. Okay,
Like
so here we
this?
go. Yeah, there we go, exactly. So
Okay.
here's a perfect example of how VRVP will show you the visible range. You see how there's a support and there's a resistance. That's the visible range of the trade. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think also another easy way to look at it is, even if you're day trading, and this ties into something we said multiple weeks, you always want to look at the bigger time frame and be like, okay, where are the important levels? So like, you don't have to exactly scroll out, because scrolling out, like, let's say if you're on the 5 minute, you're like, hey, how much I want to get a lot of data in, should I just scroll out? Well, yeah, you could do that, but why do that when you could just go to a 30 minute and just have a lot more data, right? So it's very similar. You don't have to exactly scroll out. If you go to a 30 minute, you see the the what's the word, JP?
Intraday,
Intermediate intraday. Sorry, thank you.
intraday,
Intraday.
intermediate price action.
Yeah, so you could see right here. You have the volume node here, right? And you just find the bottom at the top and the bottom of it, and that's how you find it. And then you could go to the 5 minute. You could scroll out, and you could be like, okay, all right, what am I looking for? You could see here, it's, there's a peak over here. So it really depends what you're trying to trade. But the easiest answer is also just looking at a bigger time frame, zooming out, and then finding the important levels from there. Because you don't want to get, you don't want to get too many levels that are unimportant, if that makes sense.
Kevin, can you turn your VRVP so that it's green and red really quick? I want to explain something.
Are you sure, man?
Yeah, just really quick
Okay.
because I already have a question that okay, guys, just because VRVP is green and VRVP is red, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's more sellers than buyers. Visible range volume profile is telling you not necessarily how many buyers and sellers are at that price range. It's telling you how much volume there is in that price range. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's why
I
that's why
just
I keep
I
on
just
saying, yeah, I know, I know. I know you're
I,
asking them. Yeah.
because people are gonna say, why is it lighter white and lighter gray? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's why, like, me personally, I'll post a picture of my settings, but that's why, like, I only have it two separate colors just because it looks nicer. But I mean, they're technically the same, right?
You
It's not
don't
important to look.
you Yeah, there's no point. There's no
Nope,
point to
there's not.
knowing if it's buyers or sellers. There's no point. You just want to know how much volume there is at that particular price area.
Hmm.
That's it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Some other
Um,
people will tell you, oh, but if you go to VRVP, you could put the what's it called?
Up volume and down volume in the POC.
Yeah, the up down volume. It'll show you like 10,000 times 12,000, and then you're gonna be like, oh, there's
Oh,
10,000 buyers versus 12,000. The values,
yeah.
the values on the top. No, no, all the way on the top. Yeah, and that's gonna yeah. Then you once you zoom in, it'll show you the amounts. Yeah, just yeah, you guys zoom in even more. Yeah.
Oh
Oh my
God.
God. Yeah. Oh my God. There's 626,000 buyers versus sellers. No, because that's gonna fake you out because you're gonna think that oh my God, there's more buyers than sellers here. Therefore, the buyers are in control. And you'll hear people that trade session volume profile or visible range volume profile use the values and get faked out all the time because you don't know in this buy side, sell side if these are just block orders.
Yep, absolutely. I'm glad you said that. So
Because you could
much
have some
misinformation
psychopath,
out there.
you could have some psychopath that's flashing 100,000 on the sell side, and he's just doing that to scare the shit out of people, and it's gonna and you're gonna be like, oh, the guy is selling 100,000, and then guess what? He yanks the order and price flies.
Give me another stock. Oh,
Yeah,
Baba.
somebody else participate. Come on, somebody else say something. Don't answer me. Somebody else give a stock.
I got one. Look at my screen.
Yeah,
My
but yours
favorite.
doesn't count.
Look at it.
And we don't want to talk about Chinese stocks. Okay, fine.
Baba is one of the long-term stocks that I'm holding, and it's for the reason of, first of all, I mean, Trump presidency. Last time we had Trump, Chinese stocks rallied. Also, I think some people also bought, what's it called, Baba shares as well. The dumb, rich, fat people like
How about
Warren
what the fuck
Buffett.
does one use 2 hours and 5 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, you could see here like if you zoom out on Baba, again, look at the immense volume gap, right? That's why do you think prior to I'll show you guys right here. Prior to this rally, you guys see this rally here, this huge rally that happened with Chinese stocks. I'll show you how the VRVP was. Tell me it shows me. Are you serious? It doesn't show me in replay mode?
No, it doesn't.
That's annoying. Okay, so before this rally, there was a huge volume gap, right? Um, it's not showing it, but there was this huge volume gap around this area, right? Especially this mini volume gap here was a little bit bigger, and that's why these Chinese stocks, that's why they just freaking gapped up like crazy. Because if you zoom in and you go according to more recent data, right, from the beginning of 2023, you could see there's virtually no volume traded up here, right? If I go like this and I hide that, and I just go according from mid 2022 to 2023, you could see the volume gap here was immense, right? You see this? This just gave even more of a reason for if Baba came up here, it's going to short squeeze, and that's exactly what happened, right? They look at this. The second it reached this, if I go back, the second it reached this volume end of this volume peak, you could see, right? 102, 102, right? 102, it squeezed. That's it. It was gone. And then it ended at 118. So yeah, I think that's enough examples in terms of getting the point across. Um, you do not need data subscription for VRVP. No, VRVP is available on TradingView. It's a normal indicator. Again, you just type in VRVP. Right, it's the visible range volume profile. The settings, you could take a screenshot of it right now. These are the settings I use. I set the volume area up, volume area down to basically the same colors because as JP and I stated, does not matter what colors they are. There's no such thing as up volume or down volume or bearish or bullish volume. It's just volume. It's very hard to indicate which volume is which. And then also I disabled the point of control. I don't think it's important to look at because the point of control usually is a hesitation area. I also set the width of the box. I think it was 30 at default. I set it to 15 or 20 or even 10 sometimes, depending on how much I want to see, right? If I don't want it covering a lot of my screen, I could put it to 10. You can see it becomes smaller. If I could even set it to 5. But see, look, the problem with that is it becomes a little bit harder to read the significance of the peak. So I think 15 or 20 is a little bit too big, but 15 is like the sweet spot, right? So I keep
Don't forget to show the inputs.
inputs. Yeah, thank you. So the row size, you can put any value,
500.
or I would put any value between 100 to 300. I feel like 300 is a little bit too much. I think the sweet spot is 200. Whoops, definitely not that number. 200. 200 at least you could see the bars. And then rows layout will always be numbers of rows. Volume up and down, again, it does not matter. You could change it to, wait, what happens if I change this? No, it looks ugly. I just usually have set it to up and down, and then volume area, you could set it to 100. I think it's 15 at default or something like that. It just highlights it if you set it to 100. So, yeah. Again, you could screenshot this. I'll post this in the links channel, since I have nowhere else to post it. But this is where I'll post the settings to it, because I think JP used similar settings as well, right?
Yeah, I used to
Yeah.
use 500, but I
Uh-huh.
switched it to 200.
500. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter. There's no wrong answer. I think just the higher the better. Not the higher the better, but I think I personally just use 200. 200. But yeah. Any questions about any last questions about VRVP?
Yeah, why are you using 200 over 500? Just or is there a specific reason why you're using that 200? Is there any
Y-
specific reason?
yeah, so I'm glad you asked that. When you set it to a high number like 500, it's a little bit more fluid, which makes it a little bit harder to be accurate with your level. I think when you set it to 200, since the width of the boxes are bigger, it's a little bit easier to see where to set your levels to. That's why like I personally like my VRVP levels have always worked perfectly fine, because it's a lot less fluid, so I could see the beginning of a peak. If that makes any sense. Does that make sense, Chippy?
Me,
Yeah. Okay.
I
Cool.
think that I think that the higher setting shows you a cleaner sweep of the volume gaps. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No. Absolutely. You're not wrong on that either, right? Um. Also, the thing is, sometimes you gotta adjust it for each chart too, because some stocks, have bigger ranges and stuff like that. But I get what you're saying. That's very true. Neither way that JPI do it are wrong or right. It's just preferences at that point. But I definitely would change it from the defaults. Um, but yeah. Also, I mean, JPAT posted something uh, on the Ask Us thing. It's a YouTube video that I made over the summer. It talks about the VRVP kind of briefly of what we talked about today. So if you do want to, you just look at that. You can also do that. I'm also going to post a recording for this later tomorrow. So there's that as well. So thanks, JPAT. But I guess
I
there's
got
no
one.
more.
I
Yeah.
have one question that came in. Um, is this effective for trading zero DT options?
Well, again, I'm not a huge advocate of zero DTEs. But yeah, I mean, levels are levels, right? If you, for instance, I'll go back to meta just because I trade zero. Let's go to everyone's favorite freaking EFT, which is QQQ. You know, yeah, I know. If you go onto the, the VRVP, you go onto 30-minute, you find areas which are going to be interesting for you to look at, right? The reason I think people trade zero DT is very wrong. They try to trade every single movement, but if you look back at all the meta trades I've done, you realize one thing. I do not try to trade every single movement that happens on meta. I try to trade every single movement that is big, right? And that's why the trades that I take, that's why my trades that I take are very big, because I go for the things that matter. So you can basically just go onto a bigger time frame. Instead of the 5 minute, you look at the 30 minute, 1 hour. You'd find the areas that are important. You find the peaks, the end of the peaks, and see, okay, which areas would I want to look at. If it comes over here, what would I do? And you plot these levels out beforehand, and then this is how you'd use it, right? Of course, you could go onto the 5 minute and you could try to find the mini peaks and everything like that. And hey, I'm not going to say it's not going to work all the time, but also there's going to be a bunch of times where it's not going to work, because you're going to be looking at miniature peaks and miniature, you know, levels and stuff like that. So, yeah. That's how you would use it. That's how I would use it. Sorry, let me say that again. That's how I would use it for zero DTEs. I would find the most important places. I would indicate the most important places. And as we said a few weeks ago, levels are one thing, but to make sense of the levels is the most important thing, right? What am I going to do, right? What am I going to do if it reaches a level? For instance, if the QQQ is trading right now and I'm saying, okay, if QQQ reaches 496.84, this is the top of the peak. I'm going to see if on the 5-minute, it's going to be rejecting that area, right? So if it rejects the area and I have a nice bearish candle, I'm going to get into puts because I know this is a VRVP level and this is the end of a peak over here. And then I would trade it to wherever the bottom of the peak is. So that would be, 495.02, right? This itself on QQQ, if you traded it 0 DTE, this movement here would be 30 to 40%. So that's how you would do a 0 DTE. But again, there's no one that I know that is profitable consistently with 0 DTEs. I am an outlier. I know a few outliers, and that's it. I think it's always best to trade long term in terms of getting weekly contracts and stuff like that. But I'm never gonna tell you what to do. That's just my opinion. But hopefully that answers your question.